It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, January 4th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that thinks facing the Columbus Blue Jackets could be just the ticket to turning things around.
But what if it isn't?
Well, we will get into the hows and whys of that, plus check in with Matvei Michkov and discuss an interesting move at the Phantoms level, all on today's show.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. We are over on YouTube. We're on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, the Flyers are indeed back home. It was a travel day, so a little quiet out of Flyers land. But I think that, looking at this game tonight against Columbus, this absolutely has to be the game where the Flyers get back on track. It's not like it should be or could be. They really have to at this point.
I think they have to, but again, sometimes you don't know what happens. You're off the road, you're at home, you maybe exhale for a minute. They are struggling more at home, they're on the road. Sometimes these things come into play. And so it's hard to say. I don't have an easy prediction of what's going to happen in this game because I also think there are going to be lineup changes. So I think that's going to be a part of it too.
Yeah, that's something we talked about in our last episode when we were kind of recapping that game against Edmonton, that they did choose to do that 11-7, and we're still not quite sure what the lineup is going to look like tonight, like if they're going to use 11-7 again, if they're going to make a call up from Lehigh Valley, as of recording here, to send Rhett Gardner back down and maybe get somebody that they're willing to play in the lineup here. There's just so many options that the Flyers could go with. Not really sure what direction they will ultimately choose.
No, I mean, we don't know. I'm sure they're not going to play 11-7. I'm going to guess that part. But the rest, I don't know. I don't know if Delorier gets back in. I don't know if Stahl stays in. Maybe because he scored a goal, he'll stay in. I don't know. Zamula certainly should never come out. He looked great last game, even though it wasn't a great game. He looked good. You easily could take, Forster out if you want to, but I think he's doing other things. So do I think they're bringing up anybody to Lehigh and putting him in? Probably not. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it is interesting because, we'll talk about this later in the show, but Lehigh did make a move to try and ostensibly open up their lineup a little bit. But I still think there's room to call somebody up here and try and just get them in a game and see if it sticks. I just don't think there's anything to lose with potentially making that move.
No, I don't think there's anything to lose. But again, I don't know what the mindset is right now. If I'm going to guess, the coach is going to be kind of like in the mode where, we're falling out of the playoff race. I have to keep us in the playoff race. I'm pretty sure that's the way he's going to react in his mind. So, based on that, I think, again, last game, he gave Cam Atkinson way too many minutes, but I think he did that on purpose. And I know people did catch on to it online. There were some people that were like, doesn't mean it's going to make him score more. And it's true. It doesn't. That's what they used to do in the old days. It's not necessarily the right thing to do either, but that's his way. So I could see Cam Atkinson out of the lineup, but I don't know that that's going to happen yet. But it's something I'm sort of guessing might happen.
Yeah, I think that's something to also consider. Meanwhile, Columbus is also, I think, in not great of a situation here. Obviously much worse off than the Flyers right now. They are in last place in the Metro, 3-4-3 in their last 10. And really just, even without all the injuries, we're not playing that great, but now have a million injuries on top of all that.
Yeah, there's some definite changes to what they had last time, but I think there are some pluses too, as far as where they're playing guys. I think they've figured out like their top pairing. That I think. I mean, because Werenski's out, like they don't have a choice, right? So I think that's at least something where if they lost Werenski like the day before, it would be more chaos. They've had a chance to go with like Provorov Severson, and that's a pretty good pairing. So I think even though that's not ideal for them, it's something they can get with. I think when you look at the regular lineup, the thing that's glaring to me is you have, Roslovic is on the fourth line. Like that's a shame. He's a local guy. He does have some talent, but I think he skipped too many steps in his career. So I think he's never really had a chance to develop correctly. Uh, I would be worried about that third line with Johnson, Sillinger, and Benstrom. That's a worrisome
Yeah.
line. And Marchenko, not that long ago, had 3 or 4 goals in the game. So you are going to have to basically keep the puck away from him. And I think that's similar to trying to keep the puck away from like a Draisaitl. Like these guys always seem to have the puck. So I think that's a big challenge for them.
Yeah, and in addition to Zach Werenski, who's been out several games, Sean Corrali is out and
It
on
was a
their
big
IR.
score for them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and on IR, so we've known they were going to be out for a while. Boone Jenner's still on IR. Patrick Laine is still on IR. Boquist is still on IR, as is Nick Blankenberg, and so this is like a much different lineup than I think Columbus would have liked to be icing. Even to your point, with some of the guys in there are solid. It's just different, I think, than the plan that was in place for Columbus.
When Goudreau comes into town, he generally does well. So now with Fantilli with him, and Fantilli's got double-digit goals on the year, that's something you have to watch out for. I think that's a big deal. And I think they have a pretty good fourth line. So I think whoever the Flyers put on their fourth line are going to have their hands full. I think they actually have better players than what their record is. I think
Yeah.
some of their problems have been injuries and goaltending. I think goaltending has not been what they would want it to be. So, yeah, I look at it and I say there is some speed there. There is some size and skill there. I think the Flyers will ice a similar lineup. But again, I think part of this is going to be the mental game.
Right. And I think that's where Columbus has had a lot of difficulties as well. I think
Yeah.
their mental game has just not been there, and holding on to leads for them is difficult. There was that big game mid-December against Toronto where they had a 5-goal lead heading into the third period. Toronto ties it up and then Columbus winds up winning it in overtime, but that was not an ideal situation
No,
for Columbus. And
no.
that's when Patrick Laine was hurt in that game. So it was
Yes.
just bad all around for Columbus.
I mean, you can make an argument that they're partly better without Line A because if Line A's struggling, then it's kind of like Cam Atkinson struggling. Like it's a scorer that can't score. They don't generally do a lot else. And so then that's an issue. So I'm not going to tell you they're hurting because of Line A because I don't think they're really hurting because
Right.
of that.
Right. Martin played in net in their last game, which was a loss to the Bruins. So we could be seeing Merzlikins in this
Yeah,
one.
who could have a really good game? There's no doubt. I'll tell you who's picked it up is Yegor Chinnikov. Chinnikov's another one of their fast Russians, good size, can be a goal scorer. He's got double-digit goals now, so that's somebody where I would say, yeah, you gotta know where he is on the ice.
Looking at Columbus statistically, interesting. Since December 1st, Columbus is 6th in the NHL on their power play,
Yeah.
which is at 25%. So the Flyers PK is going to have to work hard. I think they can be a little riskier against this team than they could be against Edmonton, let's say. But I think that still they're going to have to be careful because Columbus actually does have a solid power play. It's their penalty kill that's dreadful. It's the second worst in the NHL. So that Flyers power play really has an opportunity here. I feel like it's a broken record, but you got to say it.
Well, I saw somebody trumpeted in the remarks in the comments from last show. Like I said, no power play, no playoffs, and it's true. Nothing will sink you quicker than that. And again, I feel bad for the guys on the broadcast because they kind of have to act like it's going to come out of the doldrums any minute, where it's now on historically bad pace.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that the Flyers need to pay attention to here is that their shooting percentage is dropping, and it wasn't great to begin with, but it's certainly not good. But Columbus
Do you
is
think
above
anybody's
the
putting their names on the dry erase board for extra shooting practice? It doesn't seem like it. Guys are missing like a lot.
well, Columbus is at 10.5% right now, which is higher than the Flyers. Um, yeah, and Columbus is actually over 3 goals per game or goals per 60 right now. And the Flyers have dropped below 3 goals per 60 statistically. So again, these are just little warning signs that
Yeah.
are coming up that the Flyers need to get on the right side of these numbers. And I think that there are reasons to think that they can win against Columbus, and
There's
the
no doubt,
numbers suggest that they can.
but I agree with you. I think the check engine light is on right now for this team. I think there's no question about that.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully we can right the ship and get those numbers back up to where they should be. The Flyers are playing the Columbus Blue Jackets at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch every second of the Flyers hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search for Flyers. In the meantime, Matvei Michkov is back in action, and we are going to talk about him coming up next. It is almost halfway in the season, Flyers fans. And regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network. It's our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. You can also play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football on Sleeper, and entries can be made in under a minute. All you have to do is pick whether superstars like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, or whoever you want, plus new guys like Connor Bedard. Will they record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in any given game? To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. On tomorrow's show, we are going to recap the aforementioned game against Columbus. We're going to look ahead to the rematch against Calgary and so much more. Russ, Matvei Michkov was out for a significant period of time in the KHL. December 1st was his last game. Then he was diagnosed with pneumonia and came back for Sochi on December 28th. And that is a long time to be out, and especially with an illness like pneumonia, which, obviously affects your lung capacity and your fitness and your stamina.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's something that I remember seeing and was kind of keeping an eye on. And so, yeah, it's going to affect, this year, the numbers for him. You just want him getting back playing, doing his normal routine, and that's fine. I'm not so concerned about the numbers. Uh, he'll get what he's going to get. It's not like he's coming over this year, so it doesn't that part doesn't matter to me as much.
Right, and so before, leaving action with pneumonia, he had 26 points in 29 games, which was real good,
Yeah,
and he was on a tremendous pace, and so grinding to a halt, he comes back in. He's played 2 games since coming back, and he has a goal and an assist. He scored a goal in his first game back, and then tallied that assist in the second game. Both games, though, were losses for Sochi.
yeah. I mean, they're not a good team, right? So that's going to be a part of it. Like you have to balance this out. Would you rather him be on the main club, which is a much better team, but not playing as much, or playing a ton on the lousier team? And so right now, I think it's okay to be on the lousier team.
Yeah, I mean, Sochi is worst in their division in the KHL. They're only 11 and 27, negative 61 goal differential in 47 games. Like, that's brutal.
That seems bad.
Yeah. I mean, like, to overstate the obvious
Yeah,
there. I think beforehand, and now that he's back, people are, I think, getting a little ahead of themselves, maybe in terms of point projections and
yeah.
what he's looking like. I think you need more than a game or two to really see how he's doing back in action and see what more of a grind
Yeah,
looks
you
like
need to
for
see like
him.
10 games.
Yeah, so, there is this record kinda hanging out there of the KHL, under 20 scoring record, which, Kirill Kaprizov has at the moment. He had 42 points in 49 games. I think that Michkov has more potential games total to do it in, so I
Right.
don't know if it's like apples and pears here, but
Yeah,
I think that, like, you gotta pump the brakes a little bit on that.
you do it. But hey, if you break it, you break it. It doesn't matter. But it's not going to
Yeah,
matter in the sense. I get it. Like a fan's going to want to say, "Hey, look, he's as good as Kaprizov," and he may be.
yeah.
That is a good line. I think it's somewhere around Kaprizov, around Tavares. It's going to be somewhere probably in the middle of that. So I think it's okay to sort of mimic what Kaprizov has done. But then, listen, don't put the pressure on him to come in that first year and do what Kaprizov did too, because it may not happen on that grand a scale.
Yeah, and, you look at his scoring rate per game, which is, I think, a better way to look at it given all the time he was out. He's 16th in the KHL in points per game, which that is really good
No, it's good.
for someone
No
that
doubt.
young in that league.
That's something to say. Hey, that's good production. We know he gets a lot of minutes. We know he gets a lot of power play time. So those are positives. Yeah,
So I think that, expectations for him obviously are very high. They're very high for the Flyers organization, they're high for Sochi, but I just want to make sure that we understand that this is his first year out and that this is a process and we know he's going to be there for at least 3 years. So, like, let's look at the bigger picture here with him. And
right.
like, it's fun to watch the highlights. Like, I don't want to take that away from anybody because he does make some incredible moves. He tried a Michigan goal that
Yeah.
didn't go, but like, let's just enjoy those moments without like getting too like hyped up either way, like good or bad.
No, I get it. I mean, look, the way you get these players is through the draft, and they did. You could look at Edmonton with Draisaitl and McDavid. You could look at Colorado with McKinnon and Rantanen, and then Makar. And then when you look at the Flyers, it's like, okay, if you want to count Gauthier in there, I'll give it to you right now. I don't think he's at the Rantanen level, but I'll give it to you now. But you still need somebody else, and that's part of this rebuild here is that you don't have enough of that yet, and that's the problem, and that's why you are in the position you're in, and that's what you're looking for. So that has to get solved. Will it get solved in this year's draft? We don't know. It depends where they end up picking. If they pick a lot lower than they thought they would, it may not. So these are the things that's why you afford yourself the time to rebuild, because you don't know how long it's going to take to get that new core. Because again, in 3 years, we don't know where a lot of these guys are going to be that are on this year's team.
Yeah, I think that, to your point about trying to complement guys like Cutter Gauthier and Matvei Michkov, that I don't think even if the Flyers do have those 2 first-round picks, I don't think you get as risky with the second pick. I think you play it a little bit more conservative because you do need these extra people, and you look at what kind of
Mhm.
player Michkov is and say, "Who do we want next to him?"
Right.
And, if there's somebody out there that you think would be good next to him in the draft, you take them, you
Yeah,
know?
like as an example, I could tell you already, looking over the draft, getting close to a list, in the first 10, if you're not picking, you're not getting a franchise center or anything like that at center this year. So, based on the fact that Gauthier could be a center, we don't know. I don't think Michkov will be, but they may flirt around with that. You're not getting that center that you want in this draft, most likely. 90% not going to happen. So then you do
Right.
have to look at what you're saying. And then the next strength of this draft is defense. Now, defense, if you're drafting like at 10, 11, 12, you'll get somebody really, really good. You may not get a top pairing guy, but you're going to get a second pairing guy. So if you look at that, then I'm with you in the sense that you don't want to take too big a swing that it's going to be like home run. Hey, this guy, if he plays with Michkov, this could be the best duo in the league. No, you need someone steady that actually maybe is the kind of player like a Zach Hyman type where he does the
Yep,
work but also gets
exactly.
points. Like that's, if you're envisioning this top line with,
Yeah.
either Michkov or Gauthier at center, you need somebody else to do the hard work.
Yeah, and Zach Hyman is the perfect example of, like, what we're
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
here, along those lines. So, yeah, but I think in the meantime, let's have fun watching Michkov from
Yeah,
afar,
sure.
and
He'd be in the
then,
World Juniors if they had, if Russia was allowed. So that's, that I get it. If that was going on, it would be even more fun. So yeah, you got to, take your views where you can get them.
absolutely. All right. Well, we've been talking about the Phantoms and what they need to do to improve to help support this organization as a whole. They made an interesting move, sending Alexis Gendron back to the queue. And we're going to talk about that coming up next.
The NFL regular season's wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get 150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's 150 bucks in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. I know I've been touting the Patriots here. You certainly could go with the over again in the Eagles' final game against the Giants. So that's another possibility. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel over on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus all our national shows covering every week, like Locked On NHL. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Russ, we heard that the Phantoms were sending Alexi Gendron back to the queue. And there was an interesting little twist around it because his rights were traded from Gatineau, where he wound up last season, to Drummondville. And Gatineau are in last place in the West, and Drummondville is in second. So I think that was sort of a requirement in place for the Flyers organization to make this move because if they're sending him back to the queue, they want to put him in a position where he can be successful and he's on a strong team that could go far into the playoffs and potentially hit Memorial Cup time. But I do think that there's a little bit of an alarm bell with this move.
Yeah, I mean, the alarm bell is they asked him to score goals, and yet they were only playing him a little over 10 minutes a night, and he only got into 17 games. So if you're playing over a little over 10 minutes, you're only getting into 17 games, and he scored recently. Again, I tell you, it's really hard to score from the bench. It just is. And so, like, that message is the one that I didn't like a few weeks ago, if you remember, because I've
Right.
seen this before. I've seen this script before. I like the fact, look, that he's going to have a chance to compete in the Q and all that. But let's face it, he's kind of mastered the Q to some degree. I mean, he had 19 points in the playoffs last year. So, is this the best thing for him? I don't know. This is one of those cases where even though he's 20 and he's in the AHL, I can make you an argument that the full AHL season might progress him more to becoming closer to becoming an NHLer than this. All this does is solve a problem that they had at the beginning of the year where we said it was too crowded.
Yeah, I think that's, the big difference here is that the Phantoms are crowded. And, there was a need to solve this problem. I just don't know that this was the right solution.
Right.
Like, I gotta say, like, I do think that Gendron is past his time in the queue. I think, especially given the way that league is right now,
It's
that
an
it's
easy
become
league to score in. Let's face it.
yeah,
That's what it
it's
is.
an easy league to score in. It's become less and less reliable as a predictor of NHL success
Yep.
moving forward. He's spent 4 years in this league already. Like, what else could he potentially do other than get the playing time that he's not getting with the Phantoms?
Right.
But to your point, why isn't he getting, the
Right.
playing time? And I don't think like 7 points is anything
Not
to
terrible.
sneeze
No.
at. No, 7 points in 17 games for your first year in the AHL for
Considering that
somebody.
the ice time isn't there.
Yeah, and he's a 7th round draft pick
Right.
from the Q. Like, it's not like we have Elliot Denoye expectations on him,
No.
r right? And so this is a kid where, like, progression is the name of the game and learning is the name
And
of the
he could have
game.
spent a full season there this year, a full season there next year, and maybe by year 3 he's ready. Now, I don't know if he's ready by then.
Yeah, I think this is it just does not make sense to me, and we don't have any, like, real information as to
No.
why this decision was made as of now, but I definitely wanna hear from Lappy on this. I wanna hear from Alan McCauley
But
on
he's
this,
probably
who
not
we
gonna say anything, honestly.
yeah, it's just, like, it does not make sense to me whatsoever, and I think that I wanna see what the Phantoms lineup looks like over the next couple of games. We've only
Right.
got 2 this week to see, like, okay, well, then what's the strategy here? We've already talked about the fact that we need to switch things up, but how does not having Gendron in the lineup help at this point?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a little surprised, and at least they found him a good team, but beyond that, I still don't know if it's the right thing. It's not gonna hurt him, but I just
Right.
don't know if he wouldn't be more helped being in the AHL right now, especially if they go on
And
a playoff run. That AHL playoff run would be more valuable than the Q playoff run.
I agree. So I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit better of an explanation and, see where this takes the Phantoms in terms of what their strategy is moving forward. In the meantime, one small bit of World Juniors news. We already knew that next year's tournament is going to be in Ottawa, in Ontario, but they
Okay.
just announced where the following years will be. We already knew it was going to be in the US somewhere, but they confirmed it'll be in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I think
I
that's
thought it
kind
was
of
gonna be
fun.
in Vegas. I thought Vegas had a good shot. I'll go to Minneapolis for sure, but I was kinda hoping Vegas. It would've been more fun.
Yeah, I personally do not enjoy visiting Vegas. So I think, like, for me, Minneapolis sounds like a better
If nothing
option.
else, when I get out of the rink, it'd be warm out, right? So, I mean, that would be fun. I get out of the rink in
No, it
Minnesota
gets pretty
and
cold at night in Vegas in the winter.
yes, at night, sure. You know, I get it. I get what you're but I could walk out of the building and at least it might be warm. In Minneapolis, there's no chance. And I can't watch lawn bowling in the winter, and that's a big sport in Minnesota.
Yeah. All
It's a
right.
summer sport.
That will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in those mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment over on YouTube. Of course, the Flyers are playing the Columbus Blue Jackets tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can catch every second of the Flyers' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search for Flyers. I am Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.